Hello, everyone, and as always, welcome back to Strategy Gaming Dojo, where we find, learn, and play one more turn of the great strategy games. And today we're going to continue on with our basic tutorial for Gary Grigsby's War in the East 2. Now, this is part number 11, and it's the second part where we're talking about production and logistics. Now, last time we talked a lot about production. We looked at the production screen. We talked about what's important there, what's not. Now, you don't really have any control over production. The only way that production can be increased or decreased is really when you take territory. Soviet production can go down if you take over places that have factories that haven't moved. And likewise, you as the Axis, as you have territory that's taken away from you, if it has some of your factories, well, your production go down. And we can always look and see where factories are located and different things that those factories are producing, including manpower, which you wouldn't think would be produced in a factory, but it's an abstraction, right? We're talking about how many men can be raised, but you can always look at your factories out here and look at that. So we went all the way through production, and then we started talking about the logistics network, or what is called in the rule book the grid, the supply grid, the logistics grid. And we started off by talking about national supply center. National supply centers. No, national supply sources, okay? NSS, national supply sources, and you've got Berlin, Frankfurt, Vienna, and Prague. Now, after freight comes out of these places, okay? And so everything is kind of abstracted to come out of Prague as one of them, okay? What happens to it? What's next? What do we how does it move around the map? Well, the first thing it does is start moving down railways, okay? Whether that be there or here, it starts moving down railways. Now, you can control to some extent the flow of that freight, all right? And that is through the depot system and the priority that you put on depots. But before we get to depots, let's just talk generally about rail and railways in this game, okay? Let's click on Prague and pull up Prague. And if we look down here, the different factory types, one of those is called a rail yard, all right? And rail yards can have a level from 0, meaning they wouldn't have a rail yard at all. You wouldn't even see rail yard. Most hexes on the map that have any rail at all may have a 1, okay, at most, but usually they're a 0. But towns, let's get here, that don't have a depot can be a level 1 rail yard, okay? And then places that are a little bit bigger can have a 2 all the way through a 9. Berlin has a 9, and again, what was Prague? 7, I believe, or yeah, 7, rail 7. Those rail yards are important, and without going beyond the scope of a just a tutorial, they add to the national rail yard stock when they're a 2 or above. So if something's a 1, it doesn't add to the national rail yard stock. It essentially is a level 1 rail yard. It can take freight off trains, it can put freight on trains, okay? But if something is a level 2 or above, it adds stock to all of your rail. It adds the ability to transit things all over the map. It's like a national abstraction. Now, you don't really have to worry about that so much. I only bring this up, because you want to be looking for level 2 rail yards or above. And it's one place you really want to set depots is any place that has a level 2 or above because it can handle more freight. It also adds to the amount of freight that can be handled all around it within 30 hexes, I believe it is. And so look for those level 2 rail yards, and generally they're a very good place to build depots. But we'll get further into depots. Let's just talk about rail itself, okay? And so this freight is not all produced in Prague, but it all emanates from Prague, okay? Or one of the other three. And then it starts moving. Now, you have two different kinds of rail in this game. You have what's called double rail, I call it sometimes major rail, okay? And major rail in each hex as it goes along can handle 30,000 tons of freight. All right, that's kind of its capacity, its overall limit. You also have what is called single rail, and single rail, looks like a little railroad going along here. That can handle 12,000 tons of freight, okay, per turn. Now, I will point this out just very quickly. Those effects can last not only in the turn that, let's say that this double rail, we try to put 35,000 tons of freight through it, and it turns red, which we'll look at here in a minute. The effects of that can last over multiple turns, okay? And so as you start to really over capacity your rail, it can cause problems. But if you do the depot system right, this should never be an issue, okay? But just remember, double rail handles actually 2.5 times the amount that single rail does. 30,000 tons, 12,000 tons. Okay? Now then, with rail, let's turn our logistics network on. Okay, and you can see that freight has been moving down this rail. Now, one other consideration to think about is if you move troops down this rail, so let's just say that we got some reinforcements here, something from the reinforcement schedule came on the map, and we want to move it by rail or F2 here, okay? If we wanted to do that, um, it would cost a certain amount of freight. And if you look at any of the unit cards on the back, and we'll do this when we eventually get out to the units, but I want to really trace it from the NSSs down the railway first. When we get out to the units, you'll see they have a cost associated with them by a tonnage number and they would take away from the capacity of the rail line to carry freight. All right. Now you're saying, well, what are these colors out here? What is this? Now, this is a double freight, a double rail, right? So let's hover over this and look down here, and you see axis rail usage 5416. All right, so that's 5,416 tons. This is turned yellow because we are using it. But now remember, double rail can carry up to 30,000 tons. We're only using 5,000. So yellow is really nothing to be worried about. It can kind of let you know, yes, you're using this rail, you're using it to a certain extent, but yellow's not really a big deal. Okay, let's go over a green stripe and we look down here. Axis rail usage 990. That is even less, right? It's not even 1,000 tons on rail that could carry up to 30,000 tons. And so green, of course, is better than yellow. So you start with green, you go to yellow. Now, what's this orange? Why are we getting orange here? Well, this is up over 10,000. And if you look here, this becomes single rail here. And so it's been going down double rail. It's okay to here, but as you can see, another double rail goes up here, and right here where the single rail, is obviously getting some freight from both of them, it's up to 10,833. Now, we're still not near our maximum, but it's enough that the game's warning you here. Now, you may say, well, what can I do about that? Well, it could have something to do with where your depots are stationed, and so it's trying to pull it down this line more than other lines. For instance, this is a good example. We're coming out, oh, I'm sorry, here's Prague. We're coming out of a national supply source here, right? It's going down a double line, it's going up a single line to a double, then it jumps back on single, right? So you've got this double line, this single line. It comes out here and it says, hey, we want to go up here. Whoops, you're starting to burden this single line as it gets closer to 12,000. You can see that's 10,636. So this is actually getting a little bit close, right? Now, we don't have a depot here, and it's behind our lines, so don't really worry about it. Back here in Germany or even through Poland or in Austria, I'm sorry, I guess we're not in Germany unless we jump back over here. But as you are behind our national borders or behind the lines a little bit, don't worry about the rail usage so much. The game will move the rail around where it goes or the freight around where it goes, and you don't have to worry so much about it. Now, we will go back and reset our depots just to even things out. You don't want everything heading north, let's say, right? You don't want everything going up here. I mean, for one thing, you don't want to get a low or a shortage of freight to the south or to the center, so you wouldn't want that. But you also just don't want to, completely overburden the rail line coming out of Berlin to the north. But like I said, for the most part, behind the national borders of the Axis, you don't have to worry about it so much. I just wanted to show you how this all works. Now, I did click on something there a minute ago that put up more information. And if we put on the rail move here, this will tell you generally how many more tons of freight these rail yards could handle through them. Okay, that's what that number is. And so you see Stettin here. Okay, Stettin has got, let's just click on Stettin. And Stettin has a rail yard level 3. Okay, so normally it could handle a certain amount or a certain tonnage of freight. Okay, well, it's telling you it could handle 29,000 more tons through this rail yard and so on and so forth. Here it could handle 50,000 more tons. You can see um, up in the tooltip here it says rail 50,000. Well, we didn't really push anything through here, and that's why it's green and it's still at 50,000. Danzig could handle 23,000 more. These are all where you have rail yards that are greater than one. They'll show you how much rail capacity you still have left through those rail yards. All right. And that's what that number is. And you can see that again if you're on rail transport right here. But let's get off that for a second and let's continue to talk about or trace how this freight goes. So let's just talk about some freight that's rolling here out of Berlin and it's going to go down this rail way to Poznan. Okay, and so if we look here at the tooltip, you can see Axis rail usage 5416. Okay, that's great. We're all good and it seems to continue here. On we go, on we go. We get to Poznan. What's going on at Poznan? Poznan has a level 5 rail yard, and if we turn this on, you can see it's still got 50,000. So every level of rail yard gives you 10,000 more. Uh, and it goes into sort of a national rail stock, but let's not get bogged down in that. The basic idea is this has a lot more capacity because of that level 5 rail yard to move freight. All right, so let's get back to this. It's moved through Poznan. Now, not very much of it went up here to the north. It went, let's see, 33, 34. Okay, so, out of 30,000 in capacity, 3,000 of it moved this way. A lot of it, though, kept straight, chugging to Warsaw. Some of it splits off. So as we get up here, it starts to turn green because some of it's getting split off into other places, this freight. Then it runs into a double line at Warsaw. All right, and we get to Warsaw, and what is the rail stock here? Rail yard stock, 5. Okay, we can go back to the transport mode, and you're seeing it's just not hardly being used at all. We've got 50,000 tons left that could go through here. Now there's multiple rail lines coming in here, right? So this double line itself only has 30,000 in capacity, but Warsaw could handle 50,000 from the multiple lines. Again, not something you have to worry a lot about. I'm just tracing it for you so you can kind of see how this works. Once it gets to Warsaw, it's got double line coming off this way. It's got double line coming off this way. If we go up here, let's just look here for fun. 1,756 of this freight has made it up to here through the rail line. All right, this last turn. And then it just keeps going. And as you see, it gets down here to Brest-Litovsk, where we do have a big depot. And there's a level 2 rail yard here, and that's one reason why we would set up a depot here. Anything level 2 or above, I generally like to have depots there because they can move a lot of freight if you need it. So if your units start begging out for freight, a lot can move through there. So anyway, from Brest, it moves up to Minsk. From Minsk, it gets out to your units, okay? Now then, what happens as you start to cross into Soviet territory? Okay, so here's the national boundary up here um, of the start of Soviet territory. What happens? Well, as you move into these hexes, this rail is considered Soviet rail and damaged. Okay, so you finally move a unit in here, and if you moved a unit here, it would say Axis rail damage, and let's just go find one. We're someplace where we haven't repaired the rail yet. How about right here? And you can look down here, and it'll say Axis rail damage 100%, meaning this rail is unusable for you as the Axis. Nothing can come through this rail. Now, there are a couple of reasons for that. One is Soviet rail was different than German rail or Axis rail. Uh, German rail was at a wider gauge. Soviet rail was at a narrower gauge. And because of that, German rail cars could not move down Soviet rail. It just couldn't, they couldn't. And so the Germans had to, and the Romanians had to form units that did nothing but repair the railroads. Because when you're talking about distances this large, the only way you could move enough freight that turns into, food, fuel, bullets, and replacements, the only way you could move that much stuff would be through railways, right? Well, so the Germans essentially had to go in and completely rebuild the railways. I've had people say, well, why didn't they just, convert Soviet rail cars? Well, the Soviets largely destroyed all of their rail cars if they were going to be pushed back or captured. Also, it was very difficult for the Germans to commandeer those, get them up on the railway. It was much easier to have them staged back here at a place like Tilsit and ready to go. It actually was simpler for them to go through and completely rebuild the rail. Okay, so how does the game deal with that? Well, you have special units like this one, and it's called FBD3. All right, and you have four of these. You have FBD1 that's in the north, and we can go find it up here somewhere. Where did it go? I think I moved it down here actually. I think that's, oh, I'm sorry, they go from south to north in the numbering. This is FBD4. It's part of Army Group North, okay, and then we had FBD3, and then you have an FBD2 in the south and an FBD1, and you have the Romanian repair, okay, and so they're kind of matched up with their fronts. And how does it work? Well, let's just take this one here and do it. But before we do that, let's actually get off this screen and bring up the railroad screen here, okay? And when we look at that, you'll see everything. If I scoot back here, everything back in Germany and across Poland, down into Austria and Romania and Hungary is all green. Everything behind your lines at the start of the game is good rail ready for you to transport freight down it. All right. But once you cross into Soviet territory, that is not the case. You see all of this red. That red means it has not been repaired. Yellow, well, orange means that you have tried to repair at this turn, and during the next logistics phase, it should pop over to green. So it's been started to be repaired. Yellow here. Sometimes I forget what yellow means. Yellow means that it's too close to Soviet hexes, I believe, or that it's being worked on by secondary rail. I'll check on that one. But orange, if we can find some more, there's orange, means one of our rail units, here's an orange, has begun repairs for it this turn. By next turn, it should start to repair. Now, if I get down here, let's get off of that. Yeah, these are showing as yellow. I'll have to check on that. Sorry. Anyway, The point being is you have 4 railroad repairs that you're directly in control of, all right? And they can go along hex by hex. So let's pick this one, and they can repair rail for you. Now you can see actually this one started down here near Brest-Litovsk, and it's moved up here, and all of these are clear, all of these are good. And if we turn on the rail, you can see green, it's moved through here, and now it's up to right here, okay? And so what do you want to look for with these repair units? You want to look for double rail. You know, this is where you're going to get the most bang for your buck, per se. You're going to get the most freight through double rail. So you want to try to you know, generally speaking, you want to try to repair double rail. Okay, so let's get back off this. You got to be off that to actually do it. And let's click on this unit, and you see everywhere where it's red here are places that need to be repaired. If it's not red, if it's clear, then they're fine. They've already been changed over. Okay, and so let's get down here on this unit. You see it has 16 movement points, just like every other infantry unit. And when you're on here, you can do one of two things. You can either hit the R button, which will automatically repair this, or you can come up here to this hyperlinked RRC and hit that. It costs 1 movement point, and it turns yellow or an orangish color, meaning that is being worked on, and by next turn, hopefully that will be fully repaired. And then you just right click to move like you normally do and hit R again, and then R, or you can go up here if you like doing that better, and you just move along this rail repairing it. Okay, and so unlike any other game I've ever seen in my life, you actually go along and repair the rail with one of your 4 major um, repair units. This is another one, FBD4. Now you may say, wait a minute, what is this then? Okay, there are special units in this game, support units, right? We've talked about support units that can be attached to headquarters that are construction or labor units that also will work on rail. Now, I call them secondary rail repair because you don't really have control over them. You attach them, I like to attach them to army groups, armies, or panzer groups, the headquarters. You attach them as a support unit. So let's look at 16th Army. And if we go down here, it's got 1 construction battalion. That's doing construction. Okay, let's go look and who is your commander? It's actually all the way back at Army Group Center. And see, it has the orange line back to its command. So back here at Army Group Center, if we look at all of the construction units, and these are the rail repair ones. Now, construction battalions generally are going to be working on repairing rail, or repairing rail yards, repairing factories, building fortifications, that kind of thing. These RAD labor groups, however, go about repairing rail. And here's how you can see another one. And they, while you go on the major routes, they usually go do all of these secondary spokes that go off of here to make sure you have a full rail network. And again, you don't directly control them. They're on the map. They're one of the few support units you can see on the map, but they are released from their command. Now, I don't have this set up particularly well. I really would much rather have that out here at like 16th Army, because this is where we're going to need the supply. And so the more rail we can get built in and around and out here, the better. And the headquarters will automatically do that. Now, while we're on the subject of construction units, let's actually go to Riga and look at Riga the town, okay? So we pull this up and we see its rail yard. It's a level 4, that's great. But then we see damage 45, all right? And so as you take over these Soviet towns, their rail yards are going to be damaged. Now you may say 45, well, that's not too bad, you know, I mean, it's less than half, right? Actually, anything over 5% damage is bad. It will cut your freight in half that can go through these rail yards. And so, you know, if we look at the chugga chugga chug move, it's at 22, right? Well, now think about how we were thinking about this before. It's a level 4 rail yard. It really should be able to handle 40,000 tons. Now, it has had a little come through here, and so it would reduce this amount, but it's showing us it can only do 22,000 tons. That's because of this damage, all right? And like I said, anything over 5% is really hurting the freight it can send out. All right. So what do you want to do with this? Well, there's a couple of things you can do. You can in your headquarters here, you can attach more construction units so that they're working on repairing that rail yard. And so let's just go do that. Let's go to 18th Army, assign support units, and when you go down here, you can find the construction units, and let's give it a lot more. I say a lot more. How about two more construction units? Okay. Now, if we wanted the rail in and around Riga here to be fixed, we could do these rail labor detachments that go and do that. So let's just give it one of those. Okay. Um, and then we can just lock this up there, and these will begin repairing things and also working on these secondary rail lines. Because if we look at the rail again, we've already moved through here with our main one, but we do need some to get out here and start repairing some of this stuff. And so the headquarters will release them and push them out here. Now, how far can those rail units go? Well, it's whatever their command range is. And so 18th Army, if we look at something that reports to 18th Army, it's got to be within 15 hexes. 18th Army can send rail repair units out to 15 hexes away from it to repair rail where it thinks it's needed. All right. And so, two things. You have four major rail repair units. You need to be moving those from major depot to major depot along double rail. And so, here in the center, I think always the best, and let's get this off here for just a second. I think the best way always to go is Brest-Litovsk. Well, that's Warsaw. We don't want to go there. Brest-Litovsk, once you get into Soviet territory, it's right here on the border. It's got multiple double rails coming in and a double rail coming out. This is a perfect place to have a major depot, okay? So then it pushes down double rail, and we have repaired all of this with our major, and we're hoping, you can see here, here's a minor one out here. We're hoping the minor ones come along here and clean up the rest of it in the net. But anyway, you go double rail up to where you want to have another major depot. Where do you want to have major depots? Where there is a lot of rail yard or a high rail yard level, and where there's a lot of double rail coming in and out of it. Well, Minsk, it doesn't really get better than that. It's got four major rail lines coming in and out of it, and its rail yard level is a 6. Okay, now Minsk also has damage. Now let me just point out one other thing while we're here, and that is the game manual says that at a place like Riga that has a 2 or higher level rail yard, which it does, it has a 4, and it has a port, so this is a major intake, in your supply system, in your logistics system, that the game will give automatic priority to repair there. Okay, well, I hope that's true because but I have actually gone back and done something that you will need to do at Minsk for sure because Minsk obviously doesn't have a port, but here at Riga you may want to do it as well just to make sure. You could spend one admin point. If you click on that, it says initiate priority repairs. It costs one. If you click yes, you get this asterisk here. It is going to initiate really prioritizing repairing this rail yard. If you have port damage, the same idea. Out here at Minsk, okay, let's click on Minsk. Same idea. It's got 19 damage. Now that is it's really slowing down the amount of freight that we can get out of here. As you can see, it's got a huge capacity. We aren't sending out much, which is the red. So green is received, blue, if there was blue here, there's not, is stored, red is sent out to units, and black is the ultimate capacity. Well, we're not sending out as much as you would think from a major place like Minsk. We're not receiving as much, we're not sending as much out. It's even got more capacity or to well, I shouldn't use the word capacity. It's got more rail yard stock than we're using by far, right? And so we need to come in here and say initiate priority repairs. Yes, another thing we should do is probably go to Fourth Army, assign support units, get down here and give it construction battalions to work on the rail yard. Maybe give it a railroad labor group to start repairing the rail in and around here, lock it, and that army, Fourth Army, will send those out within 15 hexes of it to repair rail, or in Minsk itself, it will initiate repairs of the rail yard. Okay, and I definitely when you're inland here, you have to do that priority. The manual says, again, if it has a port and a rail yard 2 or greater, the game automatically gives that a priority, initiate priority repairs. I haven't tested it enough to know for sure, and so I don't want to tell you that's 100% true. I can tell you in my Let's Play, I've been really safe, and I've clicked it anyway. To me, it's worth 1 AP because your logistics is so important. All right, so now we see how this is gotten out here by rail, how you repair rail, how secondary rail is repaired, and how your logistics net starts to be built. When we come back next time, we're going to talk all about depots, the priority of depots, the different depot types, and we're going to get into how to structure your depot system or grid so that you're getting the best results, because ultimately all that matters is how much freight gets out here to your units. As you can see in this Let's Play, I got a little low out here and we're having to scramble. Now that's, as the Axis, that's always true with your Panzers specifically. You're going to kind of outrun your logistics early in the war for sure, and so we've got to try to deal with that as fast as we can. If I had to say one thing that's in the top 10 most important things about this game, is your main rail repair units, you have got to move them to the maximum extent you can every turn to get them as close to your panzers as you can every time. All right. And so like this one up here, I had to, we brought it up to Riga and I started to push it this way. And I said, you know what? I don't know that that makes sense. Let's back up and build this line here on the double rail. And then eventually we'll build this double rail up here to Pskov. Okay. But we're going to talk much more about that when we get into depots next time. So thank you for joining me. This has been Strategy Gaming Dojo. I'll talk to you next time. Thanks a lot.